Mayor, you are now live on YouTube and it is being recorded, and we do have captions enabled.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Suzanne, for all that you do to make sure that we're able to run our meetings and as many people as possible can participate. So with that, at 7:02, it is my pleasure to call the meeting of the Lafayette City Council on this July 25th to order. And with visual roll call, I will note that all council members are present, with Vice Mayor Andoury having a pre-planned excused absence this evening. And do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
I move to adopt the agenda.
Okay, and we have
a second.
Have a motion by Councilmember Dawson and a second by Councilmember Candell. And I will conduct the roll call vote. Councilmember Candell?
Aye.
Councilmember Dawson?
Aye.
Councilmember Kwok?
Aye.
And I am an aye. So we have unanimously, with members present, adopted the agenda. And so we'll now move on to agenda item number 4, which is for public comments for items that are not on the agenda. Members of the public will have opportunities for items that are on the agenda to speak to the council. And so I would like to invite Suzanne to open this up to members who want to speak on items that are not on the agenda.
Thank you very much, Mayor. We do have some people who would wish to comment at this time. The first speaker will be Kim Robinson, followed by Marianne Hoisington.
Welcome.
Thank you. Can everybody see me? And oh, that's wonderful.
Thank you. Welcome, Ms. Robinson.
Well, thank you very much for having me. And I have to say, it is a real pleasure to meet you, Mayor Geringer, City Council members. Thank you for what you do for our community. And thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. I have sent an email to Joanne Robbins, who graciously allowed me to come this evening and speak briefly about a project that I've been working on. As a very brief background, I'm a Lafayette mom with 2 kids at Burn Valley. I'm also an attorney and have lived in Lafayette for approximately 6 years. I very recently, in the wake of Uvalde, wanted to do something more and have come up with a project that I started with a couple of local friends of mine called the Morning Bell Project, which is a awareness raising and donation raising community quilt where individuals can purchase squares and they can design these squares with images or words that reflect their connection to anti-gun violence in schools. After Uvalde, although I'm aware that California has recently passed new initiatives, and we are, I think, one of the safest states that you could possibly be in when it comes to these issues, certainly gun violence has not gone away, and I want to keep it visible. And I think that we have a wonderful community here that has been very accepting and interested in this idea. So I have shared the website for our project with Joanne, and I know Susan, thank you again. I get to thank you in person for already contributing to our project, but I wanted to see if there was a way that I could share the project with the City Council, of course, and then possibly engage you in brainstorming ways that this could become a bit more visible. The idea is that the quilt would eventually probably not get on the scale of the AIDS quilt, but that it is sort of the same idea. And that we are, as I said earlier, both raising awareness and also raising money that will go towards organizations whose policies agendas align with the reason why we're doing this quilt, which is supporting teachers, kids, all other school staff that are affected by this issue. So we do have a website. I'm happy to share it in the chat, and it looks like my time is nearly up, but I welcome any quick comments on how to make this more impactful, and I'm hopeful that the City Council will continue to engage with me on this.
Thank you. And we did receive your written, your email through Joanne, and thank you, Joanne, for encouraging Kim
you.
to come and speak to us this evening. We can't interact and make decisions about this evening because it was not agendized. I do understand, first of all, we're actually all working together right now because you are getting the word out through this public comment time. I know that I believe there was some communication about being able to help with some of the outreach. And so I'm happy to circle back with you. And I understand that Councilmember Candell, and I also understand that the Lafayette Community Foundation is also connecting with you as well. Councilmember Candell and I serve on that board as well. So thank you very much for what you're doing for the project and for coming and bringing the information. And we will circle back.
Thank you very, very much. I really do appreciate your support, and nice to meet all of you again. Thank you.
Nice to meet you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good evening. Thanks.
You too. Thank you.
The next speaker is Marianne. And if anyone else would like to speak at this time, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom now.
It looks like Marianne hasn't accepted the panelist request, or how we bring, there we go. Or Ms. Hoisington. I go back and forth with my formal, informal, so.
I'm sorry to take your time. I wish I had something exciting like Mrs. Robinson, but I don't. I just called to see if Mayor Geringer could turn up her microphone. It's a little hard to hear you. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, not at all. Hopefully
Thank you very much.
There you go. Thank you. And you are always welcome. I mean, as are all members of the public, but Marianne, you are always welcome and have valuable contributions. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
And I don't think I've ever been told to turn up my mic, but but I will do that. Or that I can't be heard. So any additional public speakers, Suzanne?
No, Mayor, there are no other speakers at this time.
Thank you. I don't see any hands up either. So with that, we will move on to agenda item number 5, which is presentations. And this evening we do have our Chief Ben Aldrett here to give us an update on the police department and activities in the community. And I see Chief Aldrett. Well, I see his name.
There we go. All right.
Welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I will move through this PowerPoint presentation fairly quickly. And then if you want to go back and touch base on anything, also just as a pre-advertisement, this Thursday night, we are hosting a virtual town hall on emergency preparedness. So I won't dwell too long on some of those topics tonight, but feel free to ask questions if you have them as it relates to that. So I'm going to go to share screen here. Apologize, give me 1 second here.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to PowerPoint presentation. Confirm everyone can see that?
Yes.
All right, this will be a statistical update from January to June. We're also talking about other projects we're working at the police department. Just a real quick recap, one of the ways we typically track what we're doing at the PD is calls for service. Again, as a quick reminder, calls for service include everything from a dog's barking to a crime in progress to maybe a concern about traffic safety, or calls that our officers initiate, whether it's a traffic stop or something else. If you look at this, we're on track to be on par with 2021. With COVID, we did see a decrease overall in calls for service. So we'll see if that increases this year or stays on track with 2021. Of our 5,648 calls for service, a little over half of them are initiated by officers. That includes a lot of those are traffic stops or investigative stops of that nature. A thing that we've been working on, or in partnership with Mike Brand and other city department heads, was traffic safety. In 2021, we had 900 citations in total. In the first 6 months of this year, we've issued 784 citations. So we're well on track to exceed our 2021 numbers. Apologize, let me go back here real quick. Apologize for that. Sorry. Okay. I had the mistake of working from a laptop tonight. So far, police reports this year are on track again with 2021. Not seeing much of a change there. And our arrests for the year, again, are similar to what we had for, again, 2021. We always start off with our felony persons crimes. Crimes against persons are always of the highest priority in Lafayette. We'll be covering property crimes here next. We typically enjoy a fairly low number in that area. To date this year, we've had 0 assaults with deadly weapons, and deadly weapon can include everything from a gun or a knife to using a baseball bat or something of that nature. In 2021, we had 4 total. So far this year, we've had none. On the robberies, we've had 1 armed robbery and 2 strong arm robberies. A armed robbery is where someone utilizes a deadly weapon. In this case was a robbery in the month of June, where someone was robbed of their watch at gunpoint off of Lafayette Circle. It is tied to a lot of other crimes that have occurred in Contra Costa County and other neighboring areas. And we are working in partnership with our allied agencies on that case. Suspects have been identified in similar types of crimes, but we have yet to quite link them to ours. But we do have some physical evidence from that crime that we are having processed as a lab that we hope will give us a conclusion on that case. The 2 strong arm robberies, one was a theft at one of our pharmacy/convenience stores. An employee tried to confront the person, and they grabbed their hand, the hand of the employee, and then made a gesture like they were going to punch him, and then fled out of the side of the store. Because physical force was used in that, we consider that a strong arm robbery. The other one was at one of our local liquor stores, alcohol stores. And again, an employee tried to confront someone that was stealing liquor, and that person pushed the employee and fled the area. On that case, we did locate the suspect on that. So we are actively working those cases. The crime of rape is always a very serious crime for us. We've had 1 reported this year. For the purposes of confidentiality, I won't go into details, but it is a very active investigation with leads and evidence, and we expect that to come to a positive conclusion in the fact of a suspect being held accountable, but I'll leave it at that for tonight. Domestic violence was one of the few crimes that we saw in 2021 go up. Excuse me. This year, we're sort of on the same track. And again, for us, that is typically a 0 or 1 number, maybe 2 in a year. I think some could be contributed to people being confined together, unfortunately. But again, that's a crime that we would like to see that number at 0 in any given year. And to date this year, we've not had a reported child sexual assaults this year. We have had a few other crimes involving kids, abuse by parents. And again, won't go into detail on those crimes, but those are cases that we are actively investigating and are always given a very high priority at the PD. In our property crimes, one stat that we always look at is residential burglaries. We got to our lowest number, as you can see, in the last decade plus last year. This year, we are ticking up a little bit higher. We've had 8 so far this year. We've solved 2 of them and are actively working all of those cases. Again, it's always a very invasive crime to have someone break into your home where your family lives. And so we always put a very high priority on those crimes and trying to solve them. From January to June this year, we did see what appears to be an uptick in auto burglaries compared to last year. Last year, we were at record low numbers. And looking at that data, A majority of them occurred between the months of January and March, and we've seen that number drop off significantly. So we put a priority on those. Auto burglaries can occur not only in the downtown, but in neighborhoods also. So just a reminder to try to leave valuables out of sight. It doesn't always deter a criminal, but it can be a positive deterrent, not leaving something that's readily visible inside your vehicle. Grand theft from a vehicle, we're sort of tracking with last year, which was a very, very low number for us. This is when your vehicle's unlocked and the value of the item stolen was in excess of $950. And then petty theft from vehicles when the vehicle's unlocked and the value of the items are less than $950. And we seem to be trending a little bit higher in that area. And looking between the months of January and June, January was a high month, April was a high month, and the others had 2 or 3 a month. Again, 33 for 2021 was a very low number for us. So we hope to come in lower than that, but we are trending a little bit higher there. And then the other area of note for us is commercial burglaries. As you can tell here, we've already exceeded our number for 2021. In looking at these crimes in February, we had 4, and all 4 of those occurred between in late hours of one day into the early hours of the next day at one business location that had one building that had multiple businesses located inside of it. There was 2 suspects identified in that case, and they have been arrested on that crime. Again, in June, we had 4 in the month, and 3 of those were related. So that is a stat that we, again, want that number to be at 0 and support our local businesses. But if you get 1 or 2 suspects that get busy in one night, we can see that number vary to some degree in a given year. But again, we are tracking higher this year for that data. Traffic collisions. We always talk about writing traffic citations. The more traffic citations you write, hopefully the lower number of traffic collisions you see. And we are trending well in that area between January and June. To date, we've had 23 reported property damage only traffic collisions, and we had 73 total for 2021. With accidents with injuries, we have had 8 to date, and that can include complaint of pain to you have a limb or something else that's broken. We had 8 in the last year. We had 24 for the year. Hit and run is property damage only. We've had 17 year to date, and we had 30 reported last year. A lot of our hit and runs, not necessarily occur on roadways, can also occur in private lots, but that is a crime that we investigate when it occurs in a private lot. And then to date, this year we've had no reported fatalities or hit and runs with injuries involved. Of note, in 2021, our data was significantly lower, including 2020, than prior years. We are seeing more traffic out there. We've obviously had school back in session now for well over a full school year. So I'm pleased to see these numbers lower. But again, with the concern we have with traffic safety, we want that number to be as close to 0 as possible. So we'll continue to be out there, continue to enforce traffic safety laws, and continue to set citations as appropriate. This is just a real quick recap of going back 5 years. Just as I noted, in prior years, prior to COVID, we were always trending a little bit higher. We did see a downtick in 2020 when everyone was staying at home. It increased a little bit in 2021. But again, those numbers are trending lower for 2022 than even the last 2 years. So we hope to keep that trend on track, and issuing citations can be a big component of that. Our Crime Prevention Commission continues to stay active. The biggest thing of note for us is that we're bringing back the Citizens Academy starting this fall. 2 of the blocks of instruction involve touring secured facilities at the sheriff's office. And due to COVID concerns, we are still not able to do some of those tours at the jail, dispatch center, and the coroner's office. So we'll be slightly abbreviated, but we're looking forward to bringing that back with great partnership from our Crime Prevention Commission. Our Emergency Preparedness Commission continues to stay busy. As you know, as the council, you've set very high priorities on that, including public education, being number 1 priority for us, and whether it's educating the public on the community warning system, alert wildfire, the Zone Haven project, AM 1670. I'm pleased to note that Zone Haven initially been brought on board as a short-term project with unknown funding for the future. And it looks like Confire will be funding that project in the next couple of years. So that'll be a great tool for us to have. On this slide, I would like to note to the right, this is the greatest and latest version of our Loma Linda Residents Guide to Wildfire Preparedness and Evacuation. As you recall, in 2019, we produced this document in partnership with our Lafayette Emergency Preparedness Commission, with support from our sister cities and fire agencies. The goal in 2022 was, it's been 3 years since we mailed this to everyone's home. We wanted to keep pushing public education, so you will see some minor additions to this guide, and this has been mailed out to homes in the Loma Linda area over the past couple of weeks. And we have plenty of copies available at the Lafayette Police Department. We'll be handing them out at the Art and Wine Festival. Again, we want to educate our public on the tools that we have available, not only from the city side or county side, but also things that they can be doing to better prepare themselves and their family. Just a couple other things to note. I know these slides are a little full. This one, the next one will be this way, but just on the area of emergency preparedness, we did bring on our a command post truck, if you will. It's in addition to a couple of the other vehicles at the police department. This vehicle is off-road capable, can serve as a command post and communication, allows us to a lot of redundancy in communications, providing internet and radios, triage, if you will, between ourselves, fire, and other law enforcement agencies that may be responding to an emergency, such as a fire. We also, in partnership with, or as part of launching our Alert Wildfire Camera program back in 2019, the program that John built out, or the network, was also provides for backup internet at all of our camera sites. And this has been very beneficial to ourselves and our partner agencies, both in law enforcement and fire, to provide communications during times of when radio or internet may be down, and or we're in a location that normally would not have great internet reception. But from our wildfire cameras, we can beam down high-speed internet that's relayed from the police department to all of our wildfire cameras in a very efficient network. So redundancy and communications has been a big focus for us. School safety, first off, with COVID, a lot of our active shooter training drills that were done in person got put on the back burner, and we're looking forward to bringing all of those back. For example, in November, we'll be hosting a very large active shooter drill in partnership with our Loma Linda law enforcement agencies and our fire departments, both MOFD and Confire, in partnership with our school administrators. That'll be hosted in November. We are working with our schools to, again, provide training for our teachers. We've done it over the last several years, and as they come back in for this year's school session, we're making that training available for our school and school staff on being prepared for an active shooter incident. In addition to the training, we've added mobile radios to each school in Lafayette. These are all, these radios are very similar to the police radios. They're part of our police radio system, so the redundancy there. All those towers are supported with generators, and both law and fire work off of those towers. And so all of our schools have access to radios that have that improved communication ability. We've also are adding and have added mobile communications radio channels for our first student school bus program. Again, these programs are funded through our Office of Emergency Services grant from the state of California that we are still spending some of our monies out of. And then we'll be working with our school sites specifically on those radios. Several years ago, we put radios in our schools, and they sort of became a forgotten thing, and they were not based on the as redundant of a system as the new radios are. So John Cornell, in his new role as our emergency preparedness analyst, will be facilitating monthly trainings with our school sites. So these radios are, they feel comfortable with them. They know how to utilize them. They can communicate with both law enforcement and city staff who may be setting up an emergency center, and also allow the superintendent to communicate directly with his or her principals at the various school sites. again, improving communications during a disaster has been a very big focus for us. I know I flew through this, and we'll talk more about emergency preparedness come Thursday night. We'll also have Fire Deputy Fire Chief McAllister on that call, but I didn't want to sort of overkill that topic tonight. But we are continuing to focus on that, along with school safety and event safety. We have our Art and Wine Festival coming up in September, and we really revamped our plans for public safety after Garlic Gilroy Festival in 2019. And we'll continue to focus on that priority as we get ready for this year's Art and Wine Festival, which will be the 25th Lafayette Art and Wine Festival. So I'm looking forward to that. And now questions and comments, and I'll stop sharing the screen.
Great, thank you. Excellent presentation. Thank you, Chief Aldrett. I see Councilmember Dawson has her hand up, and take it away.
Thank you, Chief Aldrett. That was a great presentation. I just had a question about the school safety. I know you mentioned an active shooter exercise in November. Do the schools, do you still practice like basic earthquake and fire safety drills, or at least what's the communication to the parent and larger community on those kind of disaster preparedness?
Yeah. So for earthquake and fire safety drills, those are typically put on by your school officials, administrators at the various school sites. We'll, of course, be involved in that as needed. Really from that front on the fire and earthquake and other emergencies was improving communications at the school sites. So that was a big push for the radios, allowing our school administrators to communicate directly with law enforcement on a very redundant, reliable system. And so that was what our big focus over the last year in that. But as far as drills or other things of that nature, that typically falls to our school administrators, and of course, we'll provide support as needed or requested.
Thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions? So, Councilmember, it was almost simultaneous, but Councilmember Kendall and then Councilmember Quad.
Great. Thank you, Ben. Another great report. Thank you for updating us. I thank you for also increasing your citations on the traffic stops. I think you're showing that actually may be making a difference. And I just thank you. Keep going.
Yeah. Yeah, and one of the things that I look forward to the next presentation, a new piece of software has become available through the Sheriff's Office that'll allow me to produce maps in the future that will show you where traffic citations are being issued in comparison with traffic accidents that have occurred, along with other crime statistics. So my mapping capabilities will be improved for the next presentation. So I'm really excited. In the areas of like a lot of our property crimes and commercial burglaries, of course, those happen in the downtown corridor, but I think some of those things will be fruitful for both the police department and for the public to sort of see where those crimes and statistics are being plotted on a map. So we look forward to bringing that out in the next couple months.
Thank you. Excellent.
Great, thank you. And I'm going to hold my comment on that for a moment. Councilmember Quad.
Yeah, thanks for the great report, Chief. And I'm glad to see the numbers trending in the right way in general. That's really encouraging for our community. I had a question about shoplifting, and I wanted to know if that was classified under commercial burglaries in your statistics there. And secondarily, just, we read a lot about it, whether it be on Nextdoor or just the increase of what appears to be an increase in shoplifting that's just not reported, or the store is just allowed to happen and don't do anything about it. I wonder whether you can just comment on whether, in your view, are you seeing any increase in the shoplifting or any trends in that area of what's being reported and what's not?
Yeah. So in the commercial burglary statistic, that's typically when the business has been secured for the evening and someone's breaking in and either stealing product, maybe a cash register box that was left out, or other electronics that the business uses. So that's typically falls underneath that. Your shoplifting falls underneath the different crime data statistic, if you will. I don't have the number in front of me tonight, and I apologize. I'll have that for next time. We may have seen a slight uptick in shoplifting. I will say this: our businesses are very diligent on reporting it. We get multiple reported in a week. We respond to those calls because we do live in a community that is fairly safe. Our officers aren't tied up on other crimes at times when a shoplift gets reported, that we're able to prioritize that crime that, frankly, in some jurisdictions, they're tied up with higher priority crimes and those things fall by the wayside. So if we have a shoplift reported, we have a pretty good, I'll have this for next time, but our recovery rate / apprehension rate is pretty high comparatively for that crime stat. One, it's due to the fact our businesses are located in a pretty condensed area. Two, the ingress and egress for a lot of these crimes is limited to Mount Diablo Boulevard, limited to potentially trying to get to BART. And we've become pretty proficient at knowing the routes of escape. So our officers will typically, not everyone's responding to the store. One officer responds to the store, another officer responds to maybe the backside of BART. And so we have a pretty good catch rate, if you will, on that crime. But we also have businesses that are very willing to report those to us. So I think that's a partnership thing. One, they're willing to report it. Two, we're coming out to it, so they know their call is not in vain to call us. Businesses have various restrictions on their employees on what they're allowed to do. A lot of businesses don't want them leaving the threshold, if you will, of the business. So again, that can be a variable in there, and I understand that for businesses, there's a liability factor in there. So there are business decisions being made by certain businesses on what they want to prosecute or what they're willing to report. I don't have an exact number on what's not being reported. That's really hard data point to track. But in any given week, in any given day, we could easily have one shoplift reported today, if not more. So again, we're very aggressive in that. We don't want folks to think that Lafayette is an easy target. And so due to geography, due to business location, due to egress and ingress, it does allow us, in my opinion, to keep a pretty good lid on it compared to some of our neighboring communities in the Bay Area that have really had a high spike in that.
Great. Thank you. And just to close out on, thank you for doing the Wildfire Town Hall this Thursday. And I'm very happy to see that. And I'll just mention that it's at 6 o'clock, right? And by Zoom. And so the link is on the citylovelafayette.org on our homepage under the calendar for July 28th at 6. So we can see anybody here can come see your report and those of our others on Thursday at 6.
Great. Thank you, Councilmember Kwok. I wanted to make sure also that we got that out. So thank you very much for doing that. And Chief, just a couple of questions. One of them maybe will be answered on Thursday evening, but the first comment on the mapping, the software that will allow you to identify and map hotspots where you're issuing more citations, where there may be more accidents or near misses. I'm really excited and hope that we can layer that with our local road safety plan work that we're doing. That's also our Vision Zero plan. I'm sure I'm just saying something that is probably already in the works, but want to make sure that we take advantage of having that new software and that opportunity to have that active data, if you will. Is there an evacuation? I feel like I read something about an evacuation drill similar to one that was done pre-pandemic. Are there any evacuation drills or exercises planned this year beyond the active shooter? So related to evacuation and fire preparedness.
So none of the law Miranda jurisdictions I'm aware we're going to have a live evacuation drill similar to the Spring Hill one. We had some discussion of a virtual one. I don't know if we're going to make that happen or not. A lot of our focus, I think, one has been our fire season starting earlier. And so we're still continuing the tabletop exercises. We've already had one this year in partnership with our law and fire partners in this area. We'll be continuing those tabletop exercises, or more appropriately, tailgate exercises, where we actually go out in the field. But I know for our partners in Moraga and Orinda, there's been a lot of burns that their fire department's been working on. And so I think the focus has been a little bit different this year, not trying to stress actually have an evacuation drill. I I don't know if we'll try to, there's potential for a virtual still to happen this year, but definitely not an in-person. Just the cost associated is pretty high, both people power and monies that it costs. But if we have a new piece of software that comes out or new technology, we may look at having that. But if we have anything this year, probably a virtual evacuation drill.
Understood. And thank you for doing the town hall. Thank you to CERT and to all of our partners on getting out the brochure out to every pamphlet, I guess, instruction guide out to every household. And then last question is, do you have a number on how many Firewise neighborhoods we have? I know that we had a couple that started last year, a couple in the pipeline. And if you don't have it now, I will watch the town hall on Thursday. And
well, thanks for the great hint for Thursday night. I'll make sure I have that number. And just to give a little shout out to both our council and our city staff, things like the wildfire guide. If you look at the site, we're all fairly small cities, both in 2019 and in 2022, because I have the support of the council and the city manager. We basically paid the bill and I invoice our local jurisdictions in-house, if you will. And so they're all paying their fair share. So that's not the issue, but things like that allow for that flexibility to make a project like this just happen. If we had to involve 6 jurisdictions and paying a printer, it can just become a lot more convoluted. So I just want to say thanks. There's a lot of these kind of projects where, and the other cities have done it in return. So it's not just Lafayette, but where the 3 cities have worked together to make a project happen. One city pays for it up front, invoices the other 2 jurisdictions, and we make something happen that if we didn't work so well together, it could become a lot more convoluted or difficult to make happen. So thank you to Narup and others at the city that allow me just to pay that bill and then do internal invoices, and everyone does pay, so don't worry. But ease of making things happen is very helpful. So I appreciate that.
Well, before I go to public comment, I just want to say thank you again. I know each of us led with thank you, but thank you to not just the getting everybody on board with partnering, but I know we're working with 2 different fire districts and within our La Miranda communities, but fire and sheriffs and all that we do within the Lafayette PD happens because of that collaborative spirit. And I'm not completely a data nerd, but I love all of the tools that have come out of that sort of partnership and collaboration over the last several years. And so thank you very much for that. And with that, we can go to public comment. And before Suzanne lets the public know how to participate in that, I do want to say that if there are specific questions, we will capture them all and then ask the chief to answer them at the end. It's meant to be a speaking to the council, and then we will make sure that some answers are given. It's not a dialogue, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So with that, Suzanne, would you invite folks to speak?
Certainly. If any members of the public would like to speak on this item, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom now.
Mayor, while we're waiting for someone, I just want to thank Suzanne for sharing the press release from the Sheriff's Office regarding the homicide that did occur on Pleasant Hill Road in unincorporated Lafayette. So if you have not seen that in the community or have any questions about that, arrests have been made in that homicide that did occur earlier this year outside the city limits, but in unincorporated Lafayette. So if you have not seen that, feel free to visit the sheriff's website or visit city social media where Suzanne has shared that press release.
Thank you. And it is an incorporated area, but again, to that partnership, I know that we had personnel on scene. So I don't see any hands raised. I think that you covered your presentation so very thoroughly, and people will also be able to ask questions on Thursday. So with that, Chief Aldrich, thank you very much.
Thank you for your time, and I appreciate it. And we'll make this PowerPoint available on the city website tomorrow, just for anyone that might want to go through the data a little bit more.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, and with that, we will move on to agenda item 6, which is the consent calendar. And before I ask my colleagues if they have any items to pull, I will note that we're going to pull item 6D at the request of residents Don Eames and Cheryl McDonald. So 6D will be pulled. Do any of my colleagues have other items you would like to pull or any questions? Or comments, I guess. And so with that, are there any members of the public who would like to pull an item from the consent calendar?
If any members of the public would like to speak on this item, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom now. Mayor, I don't see any hands raised.
Great, thank you. And so may I have a motion to approve the consent calendar with the pulling of item 6D?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion by Councilmember Kendall and a second by Councilmember Dawson. I'll conduct a roll call vote. Councilmember Kendall.
Aye.
Councilmember Dawson.
Aye.
Councilmember Kwok.
Aye.
And I'm an aye. And so we have approved the consent calendar as modified. And I will note for the public that that will be discussed under item 10, items removed from the consent calendar. And so with that, and I always want to encourage, there are a lot of things that are on the consent calendar, actions that are taken. So I encourage the public to go and to review those items. Moving on, we have no old business to report. We'll move on to agenda item 8, which is a staff report. And we will invite back Chief Aldrich to lead us in the discussion for the Contra Costa Animal Services Department agreement. And I see that we have members of the Contra Costa Animal Services. I don't know if we're having them come in at the same time. Chief Aldrich is nodding his head.
We'll have, I believe we have Director Beth Ward available tonight, along with Steve Burdo. And I'll be honest, they'll be the experts on answering a lot of probably questions that the council has.
Yeah.
But Narup and I are both available regarding my staff report and the contract. So.
Okay, thank you. And welcome, Director Ward and Mr. Burdo.
Thank you, Mayor.
And I should probably know your title, but so
I am the Public Information Officer.
Okay, thank you. And Narup, are you going to lead off on this?
It's the chief's report.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I think really, this is the contract that was presented to all cities. So the contract that was attached to my staff report, I confirmed with Animal Services, the final version. There was some talk of a city or two maybe having an amendment that was put in that we might be interested in. Sorry, I've got one fly in my house that just wants to hang out with me. So sorry about that. I tried. Anyhow, so this is, and Steve and Director Ward can attest to this, but this is the exact same contract all of our other cities in Contra Costa County have been presented with. And to date, many of them have already approved it. So that's not to say you need to approve it, but this is the same contract. So there are no special amendments that another city may have gotten. So I just want to clarify that because I did come up in discussion over the last month or so. Did one city going to be getting an addendum or addition put on there? I think of note for us, if you look back, our prior contract was for 2006 and basically been extended from year to year. And so again, I'll let Director Ward, if she wants to add on note, but the goal of this contract was to provide a lot more transparency, also allow for funds to be returned to cities via the next year's contract and reduction of fees if they do have a surplus. And so I know there's a lot of questions about what services they do provide. We tried to spell that out in the staff report. And Director Ward and her team have, I think, done a good job working with us to really specify what services they do provide and what other agencies may step in for other services. So, Mayor, I don't know if it'd be appropriate if you want to go to questions from council or have Director Ward or Steve sort of highlight the things that were maybe they find more unique to this contract versus the 2006 contract.
So I'll, if Director Ward or Mr. Berto, if either of you have a comment, if not, I think the chief led us in a good direction, which is if any of my colleagues have questions. So do you want to wait and see if we have questions, or do you have a comment about the actions of other cities? Or
no, I think though, I apologize and thank you very much for having us tonight. We appreciate this opportunity. The only point that I'd like to add to Chief Aldritt's explanation, current explanation, is the aspect around a side letter that was with one of the cities. The city of Pleasant Hill worked with us to develop a side letter for clarification in one of the sections of the agreement. All it does is it clarifies for their city council members the expectations in that section. It doesn't change anything in this section. It just made it a little bit clearer for everybody to understand for the city of Pleasant Hill. Otherwise, there's no change to any agreement. All the agreements are the same for each city.
okay. And thank you for clarifying that. I think when we had this last time before, 11,000 customers in our La Miranda area had no internet and we canceled our meeting, but I know we had a couple of questions about that. So are there any of my colleagues who have any questions? Councilmember Kendall.
Thank you. And just in general, the contract looks very nice. And I think the goal of getting more transparency into the services is very helpful. And I thank you for that. My question is where I feel where I get asked of things on my residents the most, and that's those priority 3 calls, the dead animals. And I see the wording in here, but I really want to understand what your response time is. And it sounds like it's within 24 hours, but explain to me if that's, if it happens during the week, during the day, or if it's at night, or if it's over a weekend. Can I get some clarity on that?
Certainly. So our officers are in the field 7 days a week. And we have the staff that do the pickup of deceased animals. They're called our field utility workers. And they are also in the field 7 days a week, 365 days a year, as long as there's no, injuries or illnesses or something like that that's, presenting an issue for having a staff member out there. And the response time ideally is going to be hit in that 24-hour period. Now, that does not include the hours that we don't have staff on duty, which is from 9 p.m. to 8 a.m. So that would not include that time period, but the time that the officers and the staff members are on, we would meet. Our goal is to meet that criteria.
So what I'm hearing is that if you get a call on a Saturday morning, it won't be until 24 hours starting Monday morning.
No.
Okay,
no.
So we can.
Ideally, we'd be able to pick it up that Saturday. But
okay.
If not, then it should be on Sunday that it would be picked up by.
So nights are different than weekends. You say nights you don't count, right? Is that what I'm hearing?
We are, I apologize if I was maybe misleading you. We have staff on duty 7 days a week, Monday through Sunday, 7 days. Okay, weekends included. The only time there's not somebody on the streets is 9 p.m. to 8 a.m.
And Beth, if I could add to that, I think in terms of how you're asking the question, Councilmember Kendall, it's a matter of if it came in on a Saturday night, the clock would start ticking for that 24 hours at 8 a.m. Sunday morning.
Okay, got it. That's the clarity I was looking for. Thank you. All right. And then one more thing is a question for Ben is, I just what's your assessment? Is this new contract going to serve Lafayette really well? And are there any areas that you think that are weaker or stronger than others in terms of service for Lafayette?
I think in looking at concerns that have come to council and or myself, it's been the dead animal pickup. And so I think the clarity in that service from animal services on what they can and cannot do. And then I think also, and Director Ward or Steve can attest, sort of what they're legally required to do versus what they are trying to do within their staffing levels to meet some service expectations that the community has that may technically legally may not be required to do, but they're trying to facilitate that understanding. Dead animal pickup is probably the highest priority in our community. I know, and that's similar to other cities. And I think that's really going to be an ongoing challenge. I know the public managers in our county have discussed that. And I know I've seen the staffing levels that Director Ward has to work with, and they are spread pretty thin if you look at the county of our size. And so I will say this, they've always been very responsive to our police department when we've needed that partnership. And so I've never had any complaints from the PD side of if I need a liaison or one of the lieutenants or captain to work with me. It's always been a very positive relationship. I think there's just inherent challenges in the amount of area that they're expected to cover and the variety of services. That's my assessment. But I think this contract was working to sort of set expectations better, sort of benchmarks, and then also clarify that, yes, we're asking for an increase in monies, which, as we know, everything goes up, but also acknowledging that there's a mechanism in place that if they do not need all the monies requested in a year from the various jurisdictions, that we'll see a return on that in the following year contract. And so I found that to be a very positive thing. You know, city department heads return money to the city when we don't use it all. And basically animal services saying we'll do the same thing. So I know there's some other discussions we had about what the county pays in, and that I'll let Director Ward, but comparatively in the statistics I've seen, people may not be always happy, but it seems like we do pay a lower amount than a lot of nearby jurisdictions that have other animal control services being provided. So on that per capita basis, we are on a lower pay scale. And so I think asking for an increase didn't seem inappropriate to me. And again, I think in doing so, by also laying out a contract that gives a lot more clarity, I would say from a presentation standpoint, if you're going to ask for more money, more transparency is asked, and it seems like that contract or this contract has done that.
Excellent. I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just wanted to add a note that, you know, our goal is to provide the best service possible we can for the city of Lafayette and their residents. And we want to do that in a fair and equitable way. And we really do enjoy our working relationship with the city staff and also a lot of the residents. While deceased animals is a major topic for a lot of people, the real services that, you know, it's kind of like, you know, the police department, we have to prioritize our calls. And there are sometimes that we're responding to calls of dog bites or dog attacks in Lafayette, or we've had some other situations that take a precedent over deceased animal pickup. And that's why in this particular phase of our agreements together, we've actually created a field utility worker that allows our officers to focus on officer related tasks and allows us to use our field utility workers to focus on the deceased animal pickups, which is what we're hoping to see in an increased response time in those particular situations.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the questions and the clarifications. Councilmember Kwok.
First of all, thank you for Director Ward and Steve for joining us this evening and answering our questions. This particular topic resonated with a larger than average number of residents for our community and generated a good number of letters in. And so in reading through the letters and the concerns about updating the agreement, there were a number of asks. to be included in the agreement, and I was pleased to see a number of those were, responded to. But let me I wonder if you could just, for the sake of the public, so that they don't have to read through the entire agreement and see what changed and what was different, maybe on 3 of the topics of concern. One was the standard of care. I see that you have added a language about what the standard of care would be. If you could just chat about that. The second question is like animal care coordinators are helping to maybe facilitate adoption. Was the agreement, how did the agreement address that, if at all? And then finally, we've talked about dead animals, but there's also the topic of an injured animal who's not dead, but specifically an injured wildlife. And I learned like wildlife is different from an animal, but a deer, an injured deer, how does that the agreement address that, or do other jurisdictions, other agencies need to respond to that? So maybe if you could just talk about those 3 and how those have been addressed, or at least clarify if they have not been addressed, why they may not fall within your jurisdiction.
Certainly, I appreciate the questions and opportunity to clarify. So the standard of care was added into the agreement. It was actually through a lot of discussions with some of our residents as well as our city staff partners. And we recognized that it was important to put some sort of guidelines into which we would be able to be held accountable to. Those guidelines shift and change. So what we decided to do is, rather than putting in kind of a line item list of what we would do and how we would do it, we just put that we would adhere to those guidelines by the national standards or some of them are state standards that are listed in that agreement. And whether it's in the agreement or not, it's our goal to provide the best level of care that we possibly can for animals that come into our shelter. The care coordinators, that's actually, around, as you probably are well aware, a lot of the life-saving efforts that are being made in shelters across the country. Ours is no different. And we needed to have some staff that are helping us to focus on some life-saving measures, such as behavior, foster programs, transfer partner programs. And in the past, our staffing levels, we've never had staff that could focus on those type of life-saving programs. We were more of a firefighting agency and not really an agency that was able to spend the time to plan to make things possible to save more lives. So we wanted to incorporate that into our standards and into our agreements, working with our cities to make sure that they understand that our agency is here to work with your residents to save more animals' lives in our county. And then as far as the injured animals go, and specifically to the wildlife question, that was a very difficult conversation and decision around for our staff as well as for our city partners, because for years our agency has responded to injured wildlife. However, that has not been something that's really within our mandates to perform. And when we're looking at the cost of our performing the services and keeping our costs into a realistic level for our city partners, we made a decision just to keep the response to injured wildlife as a separate issue, because there is a state agency that is actually that falls under their mandate, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. And I know that there's some challenges there too, because their staffing levels are not what they should be for able to respond to that. But then there's also the other aspects of the primary one that people talk about is the deer that are hit by cars. And unfortunately, when you have a deer that's hit by car, it's not an animal that you go and you pick up and you take in for rehabilitation. It's an animal that needs to be dispatched in the field, which means euthanized in the field. And that is not something that just anybody can do. So we've worked with a lot of our city police departments to talk about, maybe they take on that role. If there is a deer in their city, in their jurisdiction that needs to be dispatched, they can have an officer do that. Or they can wait until the California Department of Fish and Wildlife biologists respond to be able to perform that service. However, sometimes that could be an extended period of time because of the things that they're having to respond to. It's not an easy thing, and it's especially difficult when anyone sees an injured animal on the side of the road. However, it is something that had to come to a decision to provide the best services we can for the dogs and cats and domesticated animals in our area that we are mandated to care for and protect. And so we're trying to work with volunteer organizations. I think the city of Moraga has actually created a wildlife watch program, working hand in hand with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife to help educate residents in regards to what to do if you come across a wild animal, what to do if it's injured, etc. And so we're hoping to be working with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife to develop other programs like that with some of the cities within our county. So it's not a perfect response, but we're working towards it, and I hope to see us continue to improve on that.
Thank you. I look forward to updates on that last item in particular to see how we all can be a part of the solution.
Yeah.
It's a difficult one.
Yes, it is very difficult.
Councilmember Dawson.
Thank you. And thank you for the presentation and the contract. I do agree. I think it covers what we want it to cover. I just following up the last question about the injured wildlife. And Chief Aldred, I'll ask you this question as well. Last year we had wild boars, we had that coyote that bit multiple people. And, we do have those injured deer. Do you think, I guess first off, I think that wildlife watch is an intriguing concept that Moraga is doing. I think that might be something we want to look into. But other than that, Chief Aldred, what do you think about the Department of Wildlife, Fish and I can't get that out. How their reaction is and how they are able to be responsive. Has that been satisfactory or?
I'll be honest. I would, on that question, probably our citizens have almost give probably better feedback. Typically, those calls aren't going to get routed through us. They may get routed to animal services and/or fish and wildlife. I do know that they are spread very thin. To Director Ward's point, they've been good partners with us. When we had the issues with coyotes, they were quick to step in. But I would say that based on their staffing levels, I think they probably have to work in a triage model to some degree. That's not to try to undercut them, and I'm not the expert on all their stuff that they do. But they are spread thin based on the folks that I've worked with, and the span of area that they cover is really, really large. Wildlife Watch was launched via Moraga PD. We had been in discussion with prior Lieutenant Brian South about potentially bringing that program into Lafayette. At the time, Moraga had more coyote incidences than we had, and so not that it was not a priority, just with my staffing level, we sort of let them lead the charge. We have not rolled it out, but it is still an option to do so, especially if we see an uptick occur in the future. The benefit of that Wildlife Watch program is really the educational component, getting volunteers out into neighborhoods, sharing the message of what to do and not to do. I'd like to knock on wood if I could, but we haven't had that issue pop back up recently. But again, when it comes to dispatch animals, I would say 20 years ago, a sheriff's deputy may dispatch an animal and that was considered normal, but us discharging our firearms on the side of Pleasant Hill Road isn't a thing we do anymore. I remember when I started 20 years ago, and my handout from the California Habitual actually showed you where to properly discharge an animal as far as on their body, because we were expected to potentially do that. So that definitely has changed from the law enforcement side. So for us, we say, hey, we got to call animal control, we got to call Fish and Wildlife. It isn't your local law enforcement officer that is going to dispatch an injured animal. Unless they're acting aggressively at the moment, we won't be discharging our firearms in that case. But I would say Fish and Wildlife is spread very, very thin. So the level of service probably isn't matching what our residents expect. I think that'd be a fair statement based on concerns that you've received.
Well, thank you for that candor too. So in that respect, do you think that you may have more bandwidth to, probably not. That's right, for that wildlife watch for us to kind of, because I'm sure there are residents who would be interested in
I'd be happy to revisit it with Moraga PD and see the successes and exactly how they rolled it out. So I'd be happy to report back to the council on that. At the time when it got launched, I'll be honest, the coyote calls, we got the offending coyote, if you will, and so the priority did shift. I'm just being honest, and so that 3 months later, it wasn't the highest priority. Moraga did push it forward, and I think it was a little bit more of a concern at the time for them, but definitely something we can revisit for the city of Lafayette.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I want to thank all of my colleagues for asking all of those questions. I had the live and injured and the question about our bandwidth. On the Wildlife Watch, thank you, Chief Aldred, for offering to revisit that. But also, I think that our now that we're going through this and adopting the contract, having some sort of and I know Suzanne's off camera here, but having some sort of an outreach that lets people know, because today I saw on some social media, some question about a deer that eventually did run off. The person thought that it was injured, but it was just kind of stuck in one place. And several residents said, reach out to the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. And so I think if we can just incorporate that into our messages, that's helpful as well, because over the last several years, that sick and injured wildlife is disturbing when it happens, as everybody has noted. So again, thank you very much. Great staff report. It was very clear about what is offered and what is not offered, very clear on the fees and how we get monies back. And so kudos on the transparency. And I think we might be one of the last cities to be approving the contract, not good or bad, just how we got to it. And so thank you for listening to the constituents as well, because as Councilmember Kwok pointed out, we did get a lot of communications, as I see everybody nodding their heads, but and good information that I think helps us to make better decisions. So with that, if there are no other council member comments, I will go to public comment. And Suzanne, if you'll invite members of the public to speak to this item.
If any members of the public would like to speak on this item, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom now. Mayor, I do not see any hands raised.
Great, another excellent staff report and not questions answered. So we look forward to continuing the partnership with the Contra Costa Animal Services, and thank you very much.
I think we need a vote.
We do need to do a motion and a vote. Thank you. Just at the same time, I was clicking that this is an action item. So with that, if there are no other discussion points, do I have a motion to approve the Contra Costa and City of Lafayette Animal Services contract? Councilmember Dawson.
I'll move to approve the Contra Costa Animal Services contract with the City of Lafayette.
Thank you. And a second?
Second.
Councilmember Kwok, thank you. So we have a motion by Councilmember Dawson, a second by Councilmember Kwok, and I will conduct a roll call vote. Councilmember Kandel.
Aye.
Councilmember Dawson.
Aye.
Councilmember Kwok.
Aye.
And I'm an aye. So we have unanimously, with members present, approved the contract with the Contra Costa County Animal Services Department. So thank you all. I'm not going to repeat all the thank yous. We've done it. And so thank you and great job to everyone, and great questions on the part of the council this evening.
Thank you all. Have a good night.
And thank you,
Mayor. Thank you, council.
Thanks. Okay, so we do not have any public hearings, which would be agenda item number 9. So we'll move to agenda item 10, which are items removed from the consent calendar. And that item is 6D, which is the award of a construction contract for Mount Diablo Boulevard at Mount Diablo Court intersection improvement project. And so I believe that we would be inviting Mike Moran over, or looking to the city manager. Yep, and there's Mike Moran.
Yes, yes, he's coming.
He'll be joining you shortly.
He's running over from the green room. Sorry. Welcome, Mr. Moran.
Thank you.
And first of all, great staff report, and thank you for going out and meeting with staff members. I know that there were a number of questions raised, and so I'm looking to my colleagues. I'm wondering if it makes sense to go through the whole staff report and then have the council ask questions, or look at kind of the specific questions that were raised, or have any questions that council members have in addition to the ones that that were raised by residents and business owners on the East End. So Mike, what is your preference?
I'm here to answer any questions. I could certainly speak to the concerns raised by residents. If just perhaps a little background, this is a traffic signal project. I know that it says intersection improvements, but the bottom line is, when you strip it down, it is a traffic signal project. It was a project that was to be primarily paid for by a development at the end of Mount Diablo Court. And I will add that there was an agreement, or an MOU, a memorandum of understanding that was put together, at least the initial discussions, probably more than a decade ago. And certainly several years ago, there was an agreed amount that a developer would contribute to this traffic signal, because it is very difficult to make a turn out of Mount Diablo Court onto Mount Diablo Boulevard at certain times of the day. In fact, at many times of the day, because there is a steady stream of traffic headed towards Pleasant Hill Road and Highway 24. And it is a 35-mile-an-hour zone. There is a curve as you're headed eastbound, and there's a change in elevation, and it makes the line of sight very difficult. So it can be a scary place for a driver to pull out of Mount Diablo Court onto Mount Diablo Boulevard. So to help the safety of a driver coming out of that, we planned for many years to add a traffic signal at that location. And with this redevelopment, that was the time to get a contribution toward that project. So there's the background. And I think that most drivers would agree that a signal would be very helpful coming out of that court. Some concerns that some residents had is, hey, we want some other things, particularly on the East End, and maybe you've got a few too many bells and whistles with this project. Couldn't you have skimped it down and just done a traffic signal project? So I'm happy to speak to that. I will say that, the contribution we got from the developer and the total price all in for this traffic signal, it's about twofold. We got $450,000 from the developer, give or take, or 440, and it's close to $900,000 for this traffic signal. And again, we were working with dollar values and construction values that have been pretty dated now. So this is when we finally got to install the signal. Some of the specific concerns brought up to me by some residents were the decorative street lights. We have two that we have for this project, one in each of the center medians that will be the nose coming into the traffic signal. That's not an extravagant amount. It does add to the safety lighting, particularly near the center of the intersection, which we will also have a crosswalk on the west side as you're crossing Mount Diablo Boulevard. It's also in alignment with our downtown specific plan and the decorative street lights we have to the east from the townhomes that were put in several years ago. And if you go up to the Park Hotel, it will match those. So basically, they're decorative street lights that are in alignment with what we've already installed both to the east and to the west of this location. So it's just being consistent. We could have done slightly cheaper lighting, but this is our standard, and it wasn't something that staff picked out. It's something our downtown committee, DISMPIC, picked out years and years ago, even before I got here. That was our standard over 25 years ago. So that's one thing that I received a comment on. Couldn't you not have those lights? And part of that was just personal preference of not caring for those lights that we selected, because a lot of the light doesn't focus down. It's just kind of around and actually can go out the top, so to speak. It's a dome light. It's not a focused light where it's lighting the sidewalk. So I can't really, without changing the standard light, I can't address that. So we've put those two standard lights in. The one other thing of particular concern is irrigation and landscaping. And I have a small amount of irrigation and landscaping as part of this contract. There are other areas at the east end that others would like more landscaping added to them, particularly along business frontages. And they're saying, well, why can't you do it here if you're doing it here? And it's just opportunity. This is a signal project. We wouldn't be doing anything here were it not for that traffic safety signal. It is a very minimal amount of landscaping, and I realize we're in a drought and we're adding a little bit of landscaping, and that was a comment too, and it's a valid comment. But I would say we're adding a little bit at a nose of an existing median and a little bit at another nose of a median that's existing, but we're going to widen it out to make the left-hand turn pocket align with our new signal lanes. So I have some irrigation sleeves. I have placement of topsoil as part of this. To be honest, because this price was getting so high on this signal, I don't even have it planted, and I don't have a complete irrigation system. What I have is taking advantage of the trenching that we're going to be doing anyway as part of a traffic signal and putting in a sleeve and an irrigation main that can tie to an adjacent active and live irrigation system to the east that has capacity at their controller station. That's very different than going to another location on the east end and adding a new meter and tapping in and doing a new irrigation system from there to anywhere else. So this is just kind of an opportunistic place to add some landscaping. We're very cognizant of the drought and water conservation. I would point out that at our last drought, there was a lot of hypericum on the very large medians on Pleasant Hill Road. And if you drive that now, you'll see mulch. The square footage that we basically turned off the irrigation system on compared to the rest of downtown, it's probably 1-to-1. We literally turned off a huge amount of square footage in 2015, 2016, right in there. Basically our last sort of major drought, if you will. So we are cognizant of water use. Everything we're putting in is it's either drip system or a very specific bubbler head at a plant. I don't anticipate adding a lot of plants at this location, maybe a couple trees. And when I say a couple, I literally mean 2. But even the planting that's not shown on these plans would have to just be absorbed with our operating budget for landscape and irrigation in the core area through our public works personnel. So that's the plan. I don't know if there were any other specifics that council members heard they were concerned about. There's nothing there that would suggest that I would recommend cutting out. I think, again, this is opportunistic. It's consistent with other locations downtown. It's not expansive. It's very focused. The medians I have on the north side of Mount Diablo Boulevard are specifically there so that we can build a handicap ramp and so that I can put a traffic controller box and an electrical service pedestal, and so that those will be protected by a concrete curb. I guess I could do a concrete curb and not have landscape and irrigation, but aesthetically that just wouldn't be pleasing, and it wouldn't be consistent with what we've done. And that's a very small amount of the project. Part of the questions came up because of the funding sources, and we listed the Tree in Lieu Fund, which we checked. These are eligible fees for the irrigation and for the center median planting. And we have a reserve in that and have not been able to spend that at a lot of locations. These are, fees that developers pay because, for example, they've got to cut down 6 trees, but they don't have enough space to put down the required number of trees that they have to, plant back to meet their requirement, so they can add funding and we can place trees at other locations that do come up. So this is one of those projects where we can use those in lieu fees. It's about $40,000, I believe. It's listed in my staff report there. So that was a question, just the funding and the fees. And this is an eligible, location that we can use some of those fees. And again, it's just opportunistic for the fees as well. So happy to speak to any other questions, but I do recommend approving the project. Unfortunately, I think it will only get more expensive if we were to defer this. And I regularly get phone calls and emails from people that live on Mount Diablo Court saying, when will this signal be installed?
Yeah. First of all, Mike, thank you very much for the excellent staff report and for that excellent background and presentation of the questions that were raised and the rationale for that. Are there any members of the council who have questions or comments before we go to public comment? We will open it now, Suzanne. So any members of the public who would like to speak to this item, again, if there are specific questions, we will capture them and ask the appropriate person to respond to those, the council. We'll have staff respond. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor. Cheryl will be the first person to speak on this item. And if anyone else would like to speak on this item, as the mayor mentioned, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom.
So is that unmute thing? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome.
Yeah, and thank you, Mike, for the report. And thank you for allowing me to take this off the consent calendar, along with Don Ames. I just wanted to really keep it simple into one area. We did go through a lot of those items, and I really appreciated Mike's time meeting us on the boulevard to just see it in person. He did answer a lot of our questions. The council has been really engaged with public safety, pedestrian safety, bike safety. And so my concern with the decorative lights, and it's just the decorative lights, is that they're fine to be there. They serve their purpose of the decoration from the east and the west end, and I understand that. But we have this whole thing about pedestrian safety and bike safety, and the whole idea of having light focused down onto the crosswalk itself is really important to me. And it makes sense to have the council think about whether it's time to, after 25 years, I didn't know if it had been that long, to change gears and think, should we put lighting facing down and not just the light facing up? There have been a lot of studies that I've been researching lately that talk about pedestrian safety and lighting and how it works. And so I really wanted to bring that to our attention. The street lights focus in the direction of the cars to give them direction, red light, yellow, turn signals and all that. But also the street, if you had lights that focus down, the warm lights that focus down on the crosswalk itself, it would enable the cars to also have a better idea of whether a pedestrian was in there. It's not just the light signal that says, please walk now. It's about cars having the opportunity to say, wow, there's a pedestrian there because there's so much light there, I can see you. And I really want pedestrian safety to increase. And if that means keeping the decorative lights, but enhancing the lights to go down, I think that's really a vital thing that the city council will think about. And this is a great opportunity because the light isn't there. And so maybe we could add a couple of lights. And this is not my expertise. But is there a way to add a couple of lights to this pole that's going to go into the signal that would face down to protect pedestrians? The decorative lighting I get, it's been something that's going there and it's been there for a long time. So those are some of my comments, and I appreciate your time and letting me speak.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Cheryl, for coming. And we, again, have captured the question and we'll discuss it or answer it after. But thank you very much. And thanks for going out and meeting with staff.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Sharon Farley. And if anyone else would like to speak on this item, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom now.
Welcome,
this is a question for Mr. Moran. I wanted to know, do you have any idea whatsoever how much that crosswalk that's going to be there is going to be utilized as a crosswalk? And my next question is, can the lights that are embedded in the pavement, like at the crosswalk, the two crosswalks by BART, the BART station, can they be added later? I suspect that they would add to the cost substantially, but I'm thinking if you're doing it now, don't be penny wise, pound foolish. But then I'm thinking, well, it's also overkill if you don't think that there's really going to be very many people using that crosswalk. I personally don't think I would, because I would be afraid I would be taking my life in my hands, because people do go faster than 35. And then also I would like to say that I think that it's a good idea to have that crosswalk lit as much as possible so that drivers can see. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming in. We will again address those questions.
Mayor, I do not see any other hands raised at this time.
Okay, so we will bring it back. Mike, I'm sure you got the questions, and thank you. And thank you also to the public speaker. They were very specific suggestions and direct questions, so thank you.
So yes, happy to try and respond to those. On more downward lighting, at this particular location, we do have safety lighting, which like on luminaire arms as part of the traffic signal also. We just have two also decorative street lights at the center median near the noses. So, and one of those would particularly add to the middle of the crosswalk that would cross Mount Diablo Boulevard on the west side. So you would get both in this case, and that was deliberate because this particular intersection is not near any other lighting. Like some of our downtown, you have some storefront lighting, you have some, more decorative street lighting, you have street lighting on the sidewalks and in the center medians. At this location, you don't have any of that. And it was very deliberate to include your traditional safety lighting, which are, if you look at a luminaire arm above a traffic signal sometime, just at night, it's the highest coming off the mast arm, and it does have some safety lighting. We will have those plus these two decorative lights. So I think that responds to some downward lighting at this particular location, and that is considered safety lighting of a traffic signal. Regarding crosswalk use, I'd say two things. I would say this crosswalk probably will not be used much right now, but I can tell you when the Park Hotel was fully running 2-3 years ago, you would notice that the cars were parked continuously on the north side along the freeway fence there, continuously, because that's staff parking or valet parking or other parking. If we were to get to those conditions again, this would be sort of a shortcut for somebody to cross there rather than go up all the way to the center of the hotel and cross at that location. And I'll just be honest, like most of us, we're going to take the shortest route and the path of least resistance, even if that's jaywalking. So rather than have somebody jaywalk 300 feet to the east of a traffic signal that's already at the Park Hotel, hopefully this location would provide a safer crossing because it will be a signalized crossing. So you'll have a red light for the through traffic and a walk ped head for any pedestrians crossing, which leads to the next thing. We would not do embedded lights or even flashing beacon crossings at a traffic signal because your traffic signal is already your highest standard for protection. However, I would always add, just like any signal, if you're a pedestrian and you're crossing, you don't want to trust a car to always stop. You want to press, and when you get the green walk sign, you still want to look both ways and make sure it's safe before you enter into the street. So, just always a reminder for any pedestrian that cars may be traveling too fast, or they may not see you, or they may not see the red light even, but it's the highest protection that we have, but it's not 100%. So, but it's the best protection for protecting a pedestrian, and that would be the safest and most recommended place to cross within a few hundred feet of either side of that location. And it would be where you would expect it because it's at a cross street. So if you're a driver, you would expect it to need to stop. So I think I've captured the few questions I wrote down. If I missed any, please let me know.
I see nodding. You got the ones I wrote down, and I see nodding of other council members. So thank you again. Thank you very much. And thank you to the members of the public who came to comment on that item. Are there any additional questions or comments of my colleagues? And if not, may I have a motion to approve the staff recommendation on the project?
Yes.
Councilmember Kendall.
I move that we award a construction contract to Raise Electric in the amount of $644,716.60.
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion by Councilmember Kendall and a second by Councilmember Dawson. We'll conduct a roll call vote. Councilmember Kendall.
Aye.
Councilmember Dawson.
Aye.
Councilmember Kwok.
Aye.
And I'm an aye, and so we have unanimously approved the awarding of the contract. And Mike, thank you again for the excellent staff report and for the preparation in bringing the item to the council. And now we'll get a traffic signal at that location. So I know a lot of the folks are going to be happy there, so thank you. And now we will move to scroll back down my to agenda item 11, which is council commission reports. And so are there any council members who want to report on activities and activities that have been happening and or consideration of items that you might want to ask to be the council to consider bringing on future meetings? Seeing, so Councilmember Kwok.
I do have two items to report on, and actually just want to share my screen to announce two events that's coming up on this Thursday. Hopefully you see the Get Ready for Wildfire Season Town Hall that will be at 6 to 7 o'clock this Thursday by Zoom. And as the chief mentioned, this is something that our Emergency Preparedness Commission has been working on, and I'm very happy to see that the council's priorities, wildfire is one of our top priorities, and for the emergency preparedness, the public outreach is one of our priorities. So I'm glad to see as we kick off this fiscal year that we're already jumping right on to get ready for the fire season through this really all hands on deck town hall. So I'd ask everybody to please spread the word about this event. The second event that's happening on Thursday as well, right after that 6 to 7, is the 7 to 8:30 event by the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Community Committee. It's their fifth in a series. It's called It Takes a Village, and that will be in person at the library in the Don Tatson Hall. And so hopefully that will not be, hopefully people can attend in person. That will not be broadcast over the internet. So those are the two announcements I had about the subcommittees I worked on. But I also wanted to report on a June 30th meeting that I had with ConFire, Chief Louis Burchard and Deputy Chief Aaron McAllister. I had planned to report this at our July 12th meeting, but which we didn't have. So it's I'll report now. And the reason for my meeting with them was actually on two major topics. Number one, how to prepare for this year's wildfire season. What can we do, and how do we collaborate with Confire to do a good job to get ready? And secondly, the topic of a new fire station that could accommodate the ladder truck, which is a topic that's come before us before, and just to connect on those topics. And to share updates from our city to Confire. But as far as wildfire preparedness goes, we discussed a couple things of importance. Number one was vegetation management and the need that, given the long-term drought that we have, the chief are very concerned that property owners step up the amount of work we do at home to clear dead brush and dead trees and vegetation. This is a high priority for the fire departments. They would like us to rethink and avoid planting highly flammable tree species. They encourage cities to update their local tree ordinances to see which species are fire prone and potentially to prohibit them. In fact, the state of California will be updating their fire code in January 2023 with regard to landscaping. So they wanted to give us a heads up that was happening at the state level. Another tactic for our communities to get ready for wildfire is by participating in the Firewise program. And we talked about how we have a goal of having 10 communities be part of that by the end of the year. I think we're at 4 or 5. We'll know exactly on Thursday. But Confire has a new coordinator, Chris Giddis, who's taking over for Taylor King. And so Chris is now in place and would be the person that we would go to get more information about becoming Firewise communities. And so pivoting to the other topic that we discussed, which was the long-term planning for a new fire station, I gave him an update on council's work and our city's work on the housing element and the things that we have passed recently or submitted to HCD regarding 2,100 new dwelling units in our city, principally in the downtown corridor and the BART parking lots. I gave him an update that we had approved that we would do a downtown specific plan update. And so just wanting to do the planning for fire stations then for the future. He mentioned that Chief Burchard said they have built fire stations on the first floor of multifamily and mixed use buildings. And they would be open to doing that in Lafayette. They don't have to own their own land. They can lease land from others and to have a fire station. So he would be open to, he was interested to know what our plans were and to talk with any of the developers about potentially locating a ladder truck size station in a place that there was going to be development. And so I thought I would refer them to City Manager Srivatsa and our staff just to engage in that dialogue so that they would know. And then he also on his end said if this new fire station were to be put closer to downtown, they do a bunch of calculations to see the distance of that fire station to key response locations. But obviously, if it's going closer to the density of where housing will be, that's also a positive factor. That was work on his end, but then as a follow-up, he agreed that he would connect with the city manager to keep the conversation going about and stay in touch on our planning needs. So anyways, I thought it was a very productive conversation to have with Confire, and I just wanted to share it with the other council members here and the public at large.
Great, thank you. Any other council members have reports or updates? Councilmember Dawson.
Just a quick update on what we're doing with the ARPA subcommittee. We're definitely active with the outdoor dining. We're working on that now, trying to improve the bollards actually that are out along the restaurants on Mount Diablo Road. So that's one thing. We're going to try to upgrade those. We are also, thank you, the gifting program is going really great. There's a lot of great return. A lot of that money is being cashed in, so to speak. So it's really good to know. There's about 19 businesses. I think Thomas is on the call that he's gotten to the program, and they're getting into gear and a lot of good things happening. So successful that thank you. We're kind of looking at that and seeing how we move that through the summer. And we're also working on a proposal that is out to contractors for a we haven't quite settled on the name, but it's like a local Lafayette online hub. So we can list all our businesses and the great ways we can cross promote businesses and people coming into town, and also especially our residents knowing who is in town. So there's a lot of things happening on the front of helping support our businesses in town. So just want to give you a quick update on that.
Great, thank you. And I don't have anything to report other than the, well, so it is something to report, but Coffee with the Mayor on Friday. It's the third of the four that will happen this year, and 8 a.m. on Friday via Zoom, sponsored by the Chamber of Commerce. And with that, we will move on to our next item, which will be our city manager's update. City Manager Servatza, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. Just wanted to report that last week, the development at 210 Lafayette Circle, the condominiums, they had their lottery for the 2 below market rate units. And our planning director, Greg Wolf, was there to serve as witness. We had both, they selected the households that would move to these 2 units. One unit is 1 bedroom and 1 bath, which is moderate income, and the price is $519,000. And the other is a 2-bed, 1 bath with a price of $581,000, well below the going rate for houses in Lafayette. So we will be adding 2 more BMR units to our housing stock. And I believe the next lottery will be for the Lennar project on Mount Diablo and Dolores Drive. And that's all I have.
Great, thank you. That is good information, and good that we're moving forward with those units. And so you didn't have anything else. So we will move now to Councilmember Kwok on behalf of the Creeks Committee. We have a resolution appointing a member to the Creeks Committee.
Yes, and I'm reporting on behalf of Vice Mayor Anduri and myself that we have 1 vacancy on the Creeks Committee. We're very pleased that an existing member, David Clark, is interested and willing to continue serving with his energy and enthusiasm unabated. And so we're very happy to have to recommend that we appoint David Clark to continue a new 2-year term with the Creeks Committee.
Okay. Are there any comments from council members? And are there any members of the public who want to provide public comment on this item? And I don't see any hands raised. Do you, Suzanne?
Correct, Mayor. I don't see any hands raised either.
Okay, thank you. So I'll bring it back. Do we have a motion to approve the resolution appointing David Clark to the Creeks Committee? Councilmember Kwok, do you want to make the motion?
Yes, I move to that we approve resolution 2022-46, proposing David Clark to fill the vacancy.
Okay, and do I have a second?
A second.
Councilmember Candell. We have a motion by Councilmember Kwok, a second by Councilmember Candell. We'll conduct a roll call vote. Councilmember Candell.
Aye.
Councilmember Dawson.
Aye.
Councilmember Kwok.
Aye.
And I'm an aye. So we have unanimously reappointed David Clark to the Creeks Committee with much gratitude for his service and continuing to be willing to serve. So now we will move to item D, which will be presented by Council Members Kwok and Dawson, related to the Emergency Preparedness Committee.
Yes, the Emergency Preparedness Commission actually has 3 vacancies that have been opened up. And so after an interview process, Council Member Dawson and myself would like to recommend 3 candidates to fill those vacancies tonight. The first is Michelle Heckel, and the second is Sherry Hoover. Both of them have been serving a number of years already and are willing to continue serving. We're very fortunate that their interest and enthusiasm continues and their passion at this time. And we also have a new candidate who is applying, Will Pigeon. We're also very fortunate that Will Pigeon is 24 years in firefighting and public safety. He's actually even served as the liaison to the city of Lafayette in the past and lives here. And so his schedule is opened up to the point where he is able to and interested in serving our city in this capacity. And so we're delighted to recommend Will Pigeon, Sherry Hoover, and Michelle Heckel to fill the 3 vacancies on the Emergency Preparedness Commission.
And great, thank you. Are there any, Councilmember Kendall, do you have a question or comment before we go to public comment? So are there any members of the public who would like to speak to this item? And I don't see any hands raised. And Suzanne.
Correct, Mayor.
Thank you. So do I have a motion? Would either Councilmember Dawson or
I'll move to appoint Sherry Hoover, Michelle Heckel, and Will Pigeon to the Emergency Preparedness Commission.
Great. Okay, thank you. So we have a motion by Councilmember Dawson and a second by Councilmember Kwok, and we'll conduct the roll call vote. Councilmember Kendall.
Aye.
Councilmember Dawson.
Aye.
Councilmember Kwok.
Aye.
And I'm an aye. So we have unanimously appointed the 3 members, and with much gratitude to the folks who have been serving for a long time, and with excitement also that Will Pigeon will be joining the Emergency Preparedness Commission. So yeah, a lot of great work going on there. And thank you to Councilmember Kwok and Dawson for your leadership on that commission as well. So with that, we will move to item 12, which is written communications and its designation of the voting delegate and alternate for Cal City's annual conference. And I would like to propose that the members of the League of California Cities Council liaisons, or the representatives, be the primary and voting delegate, and then the alternate. And so that would be awkward, but no, that would be me as the voting delegate and Councilmember Kendall as the alternate. And so that is my proposal. Are there any comments or questions on that?
Thank you. And I would very much like to be the alternate.
Okay,
at the
great.
Conference.
And I know, I believe that Councilmember Kwok, you will be attending as well. So thank you. Thank you for that. And so public comment on this item before I'm looking at Mala, before we move for an official motion and a vote. So if there are any members of the public who would like to speak to this, please raise your hand. And I don't see any, so I will bring it back. And may I have a motion to adopt the recommendation?
Yes, I move that we have Mayor Geringer be the voting delegate and Councilmember Kendall as the alternate.
Okay, and do we have a second? Councilmember Kwok, thank you. So we have a motion by Councilmember Kendall and a second by Councilmember Kwok. And we will conduct the roll call vote. Councilmember Kendall.
Aye.
Councilmember Dawson.
Aye.
Councilmember Kwok.
Aye.
And I'm an aye. So we have unanimously designated our voting delegate and alternate. So now we will move to agenda item 13, which will be to move to closed session on an item that we approved moving it to closed session and sunset it, sunshined it under our consent calendar, and we'll be now moving. Before we go to that, I want to give an opportunity for any members of the public who are here to speak to the items on closed session. Suzanne, will you invite members who might want to speak?
Certainly, Mayor. The first speaker at this time is Jana Corey. And if anyone else would like to speak on this item, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom now.
And welcome, Ms. Corey.
Thank you very much. And we're very supportive of your discussion about this particular item. And I'm here representing the Park Theater Trust, and we are clearly supportive of expanding the vision for the downtown area. And so we encourage you to discuss this particular item. We are very supportive. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for waiting through the whole meeting. So thank you for being here and for what you're doing.
Sure.
So,
Mayor, I do not see any other hands raised.
Okay, thank you. And I haven't been asking through the evening if there are questions for the speaker. So I guess I could start now, but I'm seeing shaking of heads. So thank you. Thanks, Jana.
You bet.
Okay, and so with that, we will move to closed session. Members have the link that Suzanne prepared for us, and then we will come back at the end of closed session to report out on any items or actions that we took in closed session. So with that, I will see my colleagues in a few seconds and another Zoom.
You are tuned in to the Lafayette City Council meeting. The City Council is currently in closed session and will return shortly. You are tuned in to the Lafayette City Council meeting. The City Council is currently in closed session and will return shortly to report out any action taken during the closed session. Thank you.
I see Councilmember Dawson in the waiting room, if we can bring her over. Okay, so we're all here. And we're still recording and live on YouTube. So I want to report that the council met in closed session related to the 2 items that are on the agenda, and we did not take any action, and we directed staff to come back. And so with that, unless there's anything else on the part of my colleagues for the good of the order, we will adjourn the meeting and have a good evening.
Yes, good night to Thomas, Stella, and Grace. And
I know, thank you.
yeah,
Thank you to those of you who stay and
yeah.
watch, and to our closed captioning folks. So,
Oh yes, thank you so much. Good night, everybody.